even get opportunity to pitch, number one? How do you get in that meeting to pitch, number one? And number two, just as a writer of color, I just feel like, you know, growing up, reading comic books and watching television, I grew up on, like, you know, Magnum P.I. and all those detective shows, but when I write one, I don't want to write a Caucasian lead, you know, because I feel like Caucasian actors have enough white writers writing for them. So I think, you know, our job as minority artists, particularly those ones who are on the inside of the institution, should push the networks or the studios for stories and protagonists of color, because that's the only way it's going to change, and the world has changed. When you say 10, 20 years from now, the market is going to change. It's like, no, the market has changed right now. You know, that's why these movies are flopping all over the place, you know, because people don't want to see some of these quote-unquote bankable stars that the industry is shoving down our throats. So I guess my question is, again, how do you even get an opportunity to pitch, number one?
Let me actually take that question. Brandon has a great panel later on today about the basics of pitching and getting into the business, so please come to that.
4:30, room 211. Oh, but I wanted to say something, because there's a difference between racism and prejudice. Racism is prejudice plus power. A lot of people are prejudiced. Lots of people. Racist is a whole different ballgame. I've seen things where I've talked to people and pitched some ideas, and they think, that was great. But then they go talk to someone else and they come back and say, and whoever that person they spoke to, right? Well, I never have access to that individual person. That room, I don't never get access to. I guess it's like Marlon Brando in there. You know, it's somebody someplace that looks at it in a purely demographic or number crunching kind of analysis. And what they wind up doing is, in their final analysis, and based on what everyone has said about the insulation that exists in Hollywood, they make this assumption that, oh, well, because me and my circle can't enjoy this or recognize this or relate to it. They can't relate to it. And that means no one else in the entire 300-something million people in the United States can possibly relate to it. And what I would always say is, well, that was the case of Cosby Show, Fresh Prince, or Family Matters. Never would have been. And those shows were extremely popular with white audiences. Extremely, even different world. Denmark, you know, and even on the wrong list, Living Single, the whole line, you know. So, you can push as hard as you want, but you need to get enough juice to push. You know, like I can't right now, despite whatever credits I have, walk into, the executive producer's office at Warner Brothers and be like, dude, make this. And he's like, come on. Like, no matter what you've done, no matter what you have to reach a certain, like Sandra Rhimes created in Grey's Anatomy. Like, you need to get to a certain level. Even James, best example, James Cameron, who created, Avatar and all that, he didn't start out great in Avatar. He made Piranha 2 from Roger Corman, which was, if you ever seen it. So my point is, you have to kind of accrue a kind of political capital, the same way you do in politics and everything else. You need to accrue that capital before you can make that lateral or kind of dive in.
Okay, so you're trying to encourage diversity and have greater amounts of diverse writers and staff and everything. A problem that I've faced in various creative endeavors is like my version of what being Hispanic is not Hispanic enough for the person producing it. And it's like, there's a certain conception of what, like, I'm going to create a Hispanic show. There should be people like fresh off the boat from wherever, and they should all have accents, and they should all eat mangoes all day. And like, that's not my experience of being Hispanic. And so it's like, that's what they expect, and they want you to like play that up. How do you deal with that when you're in?
Charles?
Well, I think what you have to do is you just have to find your audience. So, like you said, there's the Cosby Show, and then there's Living Single, and then there's the Martin Lawrence Show. Well, very different views of the Black American experience. So, you're pitching a show that has a certain type of Latino or Latina experience. Well, it may not be something that NBC will want, but maybe USA Network might appreciate it. So you just have to find out who's going to connect with the story you're trying to tell. And just because they say no doesn't mean that your story's bad. It just may not connect with who you're pitching it to.
And I think also when you pitch your story, you want to focus on the universe single father, single son relationship, and that's really the heart of your story. That's what people are going to connect to, despite their ethnicity, despite if it's set in a state they've never lived in. You know, universality always wins out if it has heart and authenticity.
And just one last note, bear in mind that all the different networks have very specific demographics of who they tailor their material towards. And so, Showtime has a different audience than USA Network, than VH1. They all have very different audiences they target. So make sure that you're in sync with what their demographic is, because otherwise, if you're pitching a VH1 show and it's NBC, it's just they're not going to respond.
Frank and Adam, lasting thought as far as how to get into your programs for those of us who have been trying for decades, or well, I'm very young, but for a while. How? Just give us some tips, more tips.
Well, what I tell people too when I talk about the agency rank program is we only accept 8 people a year, and your chance of getting into the industry, not getting into a program, are much better than actually getting into our program. Because there's so many people, we have 10,000, 2,000 people apply every year to our program. So when I go and talk to groups about, I'm going to East Coast players every week, when I go and talk to groups about breaking into the TV providing business, I feel like I can help more by talking about the general broad scope of breaking into the TV business rather than say, look, here's our program, we have 8 slots, this is what you need to do to get into one of our 8 slots. So that being said, because our program is so competitive and because we're a staffing program now, you need to have experience. I mean, unfortunately, it's got to a place now where there's an expectation internally and externally, I guess, to a certain degree, that we're taking our writers and putting them on our shows. Because of that, I have to find folks that have some level of experience. It doesn't mean you have to be a staff writer on a show, but you have to work on a show or have some experience in the industry. And some people say, well, that's not really fair because that's no longer an access point. But I would argue that you have to take those, you have to build your foundation, you have to build the connections, you have to start doing your homework, not expect that the door will just be open for you.
So if you do have credits, if you don't have credits, should you not even bother?
No, you should, everyone can apply. Our program really takes non-WGA and WGA members. I mean, we have folks that were perhaps, for whatever reason, were staffing a show and took the attraction of their career and applied to our program. And there might be a reason you might think that person might be good at this time to be in our program. But what I'm saying is I wouldn't wait for a program. I wouldn't wait and say, this is what I need to do. If I don't get it this year, I'm going to apply to next year for the program. I think that's great to do. But you should be looking more at what are the practical steps you're taking now to become talent credit? Are you doing everything you need to do to be an assistant on a show? Are you doing whatever you can to be close to the creative process? I mean, that's what's really important. That's how you earn your stripes. That's how you build connections and relationships, which is probably more important than getting into a program. That's my.
But there's 5 seconds because they had a stop sign up back there. Yeah, you could sum it all up with, okay, write what you know. First, write what you know and write a lot of it what you're passionate about, with universal truths in there, no matter what it is. Then network as much as you can, get to know as many people in Hollywood by taking crappy jobs and getting to meet people, whatever, so that people want to help you when you have the material and they have a chance to do it. And apply to every program that you can find, every contest, just go for it. And then finally, okay, outside the studio system, there's now a whole new world of you can do your own thing on the cheap. If you make a killer viral video, show, movie, whatever, it can get out there without this whole system weighing in.
And actually, that happened to Randall Park. He got an NBC Hollywood deal from his short film. So,
but he worked within the system too to lay the groundwork without everyone really respecting him. So, but it can be done that way, like totally cold, but it helps to have the foundation.
please thank my guests.